Welcome! Today we're going to learn to play Arkham Horror. Arkham Horror is a 1 to 8 player co-op dice rolling hand management game in which we take the role of investigators in the 1920s town of Arkham, Massachusetts. There's a dark shadow growing in the city. There are aliens showing up through dimensional gates, which is a precursor to the bigger, badder, and harder ancient one that we could face. If we don't close the gates before the ancient one shows up, we'll have to fight the ancient one, and if we lose, the entire town of Arkham is doomed. There are 3 ways in which our team of investigators can win this game. 1, we can seal gates. If we seal 6 gates, then our team wins. 2, we can close gates. If we close all the gates on the board and have gate tokens equal to the number of players, then we win. The 3rd and much harder way is to defeat the Ancient One after they show up. Now that we know what the winning conditions are, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the components, the setup, and how a round and turn work in Arkham Horror. Now let's look at the game components for Arkham Horror. We're going to start with the main game board, which is in the center of the table. And then each person is going to get their own investigator sheet. And then to go along with their investigator sheet, they'll have the matching player marker. And then some other player tokens will be these skill sliders, which you'll put over a pair of skills before you start. So each player will need 3 of them. These brains are your sanity tokens. These hearts are your stamina tokens. And you're also going to notice this round marker, which is the first player token. Then you have the Ancient One sheet. And then we have some more generic tokens. You'll notice the green tokens on the board, which are your clue tokens. You'll also see that each player has some money tokens, and you'll be using these throughout the game. And then you'll have the Doom or Elder Sign token, which you'll be using on the Ancient One, and then of course to seal gates. Next we have the small cards, which are your investigator cards. You have the common item deck, the unique item deck, the spell deck, ally deck, and the skill deck. Now on the bottom side of the board, you're going to notice the silver Twilight membership, the bank loan cards, the blessing or cursed cards, the retainer card, and then the deputy card. Then we have the larger cards. There are location cards off the right side of the board. There are your gate cards. And lastly, the Mythos cards. Last, we have some markers that will start showing up on the board. First are the monster markers, which have different borders. Black means normal, yellow means stationary, red means fast, blue means flying, and green is special. Then we have these gate markers, which will show you where a gate has opened up in the city. We have these gate explored tokens and the activity markers. And then we have these closed markers, which will show you when areas have been closed throughout the game. And then finally, the terror marker, which will be on the terror track. Now let's look at a setup for Arkham Horror. When we're setting up a game of Arkham Horror, it takes 12 steps. Step 1 is to prepare the playing area, putting the board game in the center and putting your terror track at 0. Next, you are going to place the initial cubes on all of the unstable locations, which are every location that has a red diamond. Then you're going to shuffle and separate all of your decks, so your investigator decks and your ancient one decks. Then you're going to choose a first player. Step number 5 is to pick or get your investigator. Make sure that you understand their special ability when you get them. Step number 6 is to receive the fixed and random possessions for your investigator. So for Carolyn, she's going to receive $7, a clue token, 2 unique items, 2 common items, and 1 skill. Step number 7 is to reveal the ancient one that you will be fighting. Step 8 is to finish your investigator setup by getting your sanity, stamina, and placing your skills on your investigator card. Step number 9 is to create your monster cup. So you're going to take your monster markers and put them in either a cup or a bag to draw from. Step number 10 is to shuffle and stack your gate markers. Step number 11 is to place the investigators on their home location. So Carolyn would go to the asylum. And then the last step, step number 12, is to draw and resolve a mythos card. Make sure that the one you resolve is a non-rumor card. After you've done that, we are ready to start the first round and the first turn of the game. Each round in Arkham Horror consists of 5 phases: the upkeep phase, the movement phase, the encounter phase, the otherworld encounter phase, and the mythos phase. Phase number 1 is the upkeep phase. During this phase, you are going to refresh any exhausted cards that you have, perform any upkeep actions, like Carolyn's special action or any of the special cards, and then finally, you can move your skill slider. The total number of movements for the skill slider is equal to the focus number on your investigator card. After you've done all of those things, we are going to move on to phase 2, the movement phase. During the movement phase, you can perform one of 3 types of movements. The first would be a world movement, which means that you can move the number of spaces in Arkham equal to your speed. The second would be the otherworld movement, which if you were in the first space, you would move to the second. And if you were in the second space at the start of this turn, you would move back through the gate. And lastly, if you were delayed for some reason, say you were lost in time and space, you would take your character and turn it upright. Now, if you end up in a spot with a clue token, you may take that token. If you end up in a spot throughout your movement that has a monster marker, then you must either evade or fight that monster. If there were multiple monsters in a particular spot, you would have to either evade or combat each monster individually. So, if you want to evade a monster and simply go by it, you must try to do a evade check. To do this, you take your sneak number and you add it to the awareness number, which is the top right number on the front of the monster marker, and that's the number of dice you get to roll. Now, you only need 1 success, and in Arkham Horror, a success is either a 5 or a 6. So, if you successfully evade the monster, you can simply go by. If you do not, then you are going to take the damage that you see in stamina on the back of the monster. So in this case, you would see 2 that you would lose, and then you would go into a fight with that monster. When fighting a monster, you start with the horror check. To do this, you take your will rating and the monster's horror rating, which is in the bottom left corner, and you roll that many dice. If you get at least 1 success, then you can move on to the next part. If you do not, then you have to pay the number of sanity markers that you see in the bottom left corner of the monster marker. Then we move to the flee or fight part of combat. If you decide to flee at this point, you can do an evade check. If you decide to fight, then you do a combat check. To do this, you take your fight rating along with the combat rating in the bottom right corner of the monster marker and roll that many dice. You have to have the number of successes equal to the number of blood marks to defeat the monster. If you defeat the monster, then you simply take him off the board and keep him as your monster trophy. If you lose, you have to pay the right bottom number of stamina markers. If you lost the combat, you have to continue the combat until either you successfully evade, successfully defeat the monster, or run out of stamina or sanity. If you run out of sanity, you're considered to be insane. You will lose half of your clue tokens rounded down and any retainers that you have, and then your character would go to the asylum and gain just 1 sanity. If you have 0 stamina, you are considered to be unconscious, and then you will lose half of your clue tokens rounded down, and then any retainers, and go to the hospital and gain 1 stamina back. If you were in another world when this happened, then your investigator marker would move to the lost in time and space. You would still lose half of your clue tokens and any retainers, and then regain 1 of either stamina or sanity. After you've spent another turn in the lost in time and space, when coming back, you could go to anywhere in the city. This brings us to phase number 3, the Arkham Encounter phase. If you are in a specific location that does not have a gate, then you would draw that color's card from the location cards and read your specific location on the back and resolve any effects. If you were in a spot that had a gate that you have not traveled through, you would simply go to that other world. If you had already traveled through that other world, then you can either close or seal the gate. To close the gate, you will do either a lore or a fight check, adding the number on the gate. If you are successful getting at least 1, then the gate closes and you take the gate marker as your trophy. If you pay 5 clue tokens, then you can place an elder sign on the gate that will seal the gate so that no more gates could open in that location. When you close or seal the gate, all the monsters with the same symbol would go back to the monster cup. And then we'd be ready to start phase number 4. Phase 4 is the Other World Encounters phase. During this phase, if you are in another world, you are going to draw a gate card until you get one that matches your world colors. Once you do that, you're going to read and resolve the card. That moves us into phase number 5, which is the Mythos phase. During this phase, you are going to draw and resolve 1 Mythos card in 4 parts. The first part is to open a gate and spawn a monster. So when you're drawing the card, you're going to open a gate in the bottom left corner and spawn a random monster from the cup. If this gate lands on a gate that already has something there, then you would have a monster surge. That means that you would draw a monster for every open gate or a number equal to the number of players, whichever is greater. If there's an elder sign in that particular location, then nothing would happen during this part. And then if there were no gate in that particular location, you would put a gate, spawn a monster, put a doom token on the Ancient One's doom track, and if there was an investigator in that particular location, he would get pulled through the gate. When that happens, you put him on his side in that other world location. The second part is to put a clue token down. So it says clue appears at, and that's the place you would put that clue token. The third part is to move monsters. If the number of monsters in the city is higher than the number of players plus 3, then those monsters would automatically go to the outskirts. If the outskirts reach the maximum number, So in this case, in a 2-player game, the maximum number would be 6 in the outskirts. Then those 6 would go back to the cup, and your terror track would go up 1. When that happens, when you get to 3, then you're going to notice that the general store closes. If you get to 6, then the shop in Northside closes. When you get to 9, the magic shop closes. And then when you get to 10, there will no longer be a limit on the city, and the city is considered to be overrun. When you're placing monsters and moving them, the movements for monsters in this particular case will follow the symbols in the bottom right corner of the Mythos card. Those symbols need to match a particular monster for it to be moved. Monsters in the black border will move 1 time just as normal. So if it were in the black section, it would move along the black line. If it was in the white section, it would move along the white arrow and go down that line. If it were in red, then it would move twice. If it were in yellow, it would stay in that location and never move. If it were green, it would use special movements, and if it were blue, it is considered to be a flying monster. It would still move, but if it is not next to or 1 space away one of the investigators, it would immediately go to the sky. This means that if an investigator is in any of the streets, that the monster can swoop down and land where the investigator is located. If that's the case, then in the next round a combat would ensue. If any of the monsters finish on a place where an investigator is located, then in the next turn they would have to evade or fight during their movement phase. Lastly, you would activate the ability at the top of the Mythos card. Once you've done that, the rounds would continue on and on until you close gates, seal gates, or if you end up having too many gates open, so in a 2-player game, if you have 8 gates open, or if the doom track gets to the red spot, then you would have a final battle and 1 last chance to win the game. Now let's look at the final battle. You've awakened the Ancient One, and if that happens and anyone is lost in time and space, they are immediately devoured and out of the game. If you have any environment or rumor cards, those are immediately discarded. And then the rounds will have 3 parts until either the Ancient One wins or the investigators. Part number 1 is the refresh part. It's just like the refresh phase for all of our investigators. Next, the investigators attack. So they do a combat check against the Ancient One. So of course they use their fight against his combat strength and roll that number of dice. The successes are cumulative. So after every single person does their combat check, add them all together. If the number of successes is greater than or equal to the number of players, then you will remove one of the Doom tokens. If you remove the last Doom token, then the investigators win the game. Then we move into part 3 is when the Ancient One attacks each of our investigators. They have a specific attack written on each one of their Ancient One cards. And then if they bring one of our investigators down to 0 stamina or 0 sanity at any point, those investigators have been devoured and then they are out of the game. These 3 steps will be going on until either the Ancient One wins with all the investigators being devoured, or the investigators win by pulling the last Doom token off of the Doom track.